Cool. Thanks to the library for providing seeds. That's awesome. At the end, if you guys want to come out and check out these books up close, you're welcome to. But yeah, so I'm Morgan George, like Ashley was saying. I'm a professional wildlife biologist, and I've been doing that for, I guess now, like almost 5 years. Before that, I was a conservation educator, so kind of doing stuff sort of like this, but for kids. So yeah, today I'm going to talk to you guys about just everyday environmental advocacy and activism, and kind of based around the community book we're all reading, The Music of Bees. So, this little guy. So now I do a lot of endangered species surveys and bird surveys. This is a Sherman's fox squirrel that I saw in Florida. I thought that was pretty cool. So the first topic I'm going to talk about is just the power of environmental education. It's a super powerful tool, very empowering for a lot of people. This is a book that I use a lot when I was a conservation educator, and it says, "In the end, we will conserve only what we love. We will love only what we understand. We will understand only what we are taught." And then this is a kestrel from a survey I did in Puerto Rico. We have kestrels here. This is like a subspecies of them, but still very similar looking. Most of these pictures I've got some kind of backstory for, so just be ready for that. Okay, so back to the book. A big theme of the book is environmental education. So this is about Jacob and environmental education. So in the beginning of the book, Jacob didn't even really know anything about bees, and this is a can-be answered question. At what point, like in the book, did we see him become interested in the bees? Yeah, exactly, yeah. So whenever he met Alice, and she educated him on just how cool and intricate the lives of bees were. It's something he never would have known if he never would have been educated, and he probably wouldn't have really cared and found a passion. So yeah, when he was taught about their intricate lives, is when he became interested. So if there's no one to teach us about bees or even the environment, how would we know to be advocates for just local beehives or even on a global scale? So that's why I think environmental education is very empowering, it's very important, especially for kids, but for everybody. So when we're educated about topics, we're called to care about them. So until we know, why would we care, kind of? Like, when you're ignorant to an issue, it's hard to care about it if you know very little. So yeah, that's why it's so important. Here's some success stories of just environmental education. So a big one that most people probably know about, bald eagles and DDT. So DDT is a pesticide that causes eggshell thinning for lots of birds, but bald eagles is a very iconic species, so it's one that people pay a lot of attention to. So in the 1940s, I've got a timeline. I think the 1940s was when DDT was actually really used a lot in the U.S. So just a few facts about DDT. It did almost push bald eagles to extinction. And so they're such an iconic kind of mega fauna species that people care a lot about. DDT also lasts a long time, so it persists a long time in the environment, and it's still around. It causes toxic bioaccumulation. So if a small little bug eats a plant that is sprayed with DDT, something eats the bug, something eats that, a bald eagle eats that, and then you have this very toxic bioaccumulation. And with raptors, it's a big problem with lead as well, currently. So yeah, what changed their downward trajectory? I would say activism. Lots of things, but let's go. This is just a poster I found from the science history. Yeah, I was like, that's crazy to see now, knowing what we know about DDT. But yeah, this was printed in Time magazine. It's an ad, so it's paid for by, the maker of DDT. So yeah, it says DDT is good for me, and it's a woman dancing with a bunch of animals and fruits and veggies. And the text is blurry even in the database, so it's hard to see. But it basically just goes over oh, it's really good for your food. It's good for your home. Because people sprayed it in their homes, to treat bed bugs and stuff. There are videos of people literally spraying this over a baby's crib. which is just like crazy to think about now. It's still used, not so much in the US, but in other countries for control of malaria carrying mosquitoes, so it's not gone. It's still used, but not as much. So yeah, it says good for fruits, good for crops, good for industry, good for dairies, just so it's just a fix all, apparently.
What commercial entity produced DDT most?
I'm not sure like what company produced it most. I don't think that Pinsalt Chemicals, I don't think they are the ones who made this chemical compound. They're just one of the ones that sell it. I'm not sure who actually made it.
Is it DuPont?
I would not be surprised if it was DuPont, because they made a lot of these kind of super chemicals, well, and forever chemicals that we know of now. Another really good example of environmental activism is just people becoming aware of these forever chemicals and the consequences. Because DuPont was kind of like this too, where they were like, this is awesome, guys, like, spray this on everything and put these chemicals in everything. And then we learned, oh, we should do that. So just an interesting little picture. So yeah, how did DDT go from being called a miracle pesticide to being pretty much nationally banned? A big reason is Rachel Carson, and her book Silent Spring. So this is Rachel Carson, and this is an edition of Silent Spring I've never actually seen, but that was really cool. It shows dying flowers and then a bird laying on its back. So the book's titled Silent Spring because it was kind of confronting readers with the reality of if spring was silent and we had no more bird song. And that kind of really, I think, resonated with people because it was just a huge, huge book. It was unfortunately like more popular, I think, after Rachel Carson's death because she died not very long after publishing it. But it really caught on. So according to the EPA, one of the main factors that attributed to the banning of DDT was growing public and user concern over adverse environmental side effects. And a lot of people became aware of this through this book. So that's pretty cool. So, also, side note, my botany teacher in college looks almost exactly like Rachel Carson, which is crazy. I like wanted to message her on Facebook, like, was this on purpose? Like, are you meaning to look exactly like this? Because you're killing it. Okay, so this is just an example that every voice needs to be amplified in conservation education. And it's so important that communities that might not get a lot of attention, which at this time, the 60s, not a lot of women in wildlife conservation. So Rachel Carson started college as an English major, which I think is funny because like she didn't even know she had this passion, and she kind of like changed the world of environmental activism. So she was inspired by her female biology teacher to change her major to biology, and she was one of only 3 women in the biology program, which I thought was a pretty cool fact. So she then became the 2nd woman ever hired by the U.S. Bureau of Fisheries. And there's like a big gap here in timeline. She went through a lot in her life, a lot of like loss and a lot of change and turbulence. She tried to get her PhD, but because of the Great Depression, she couldn't and just didn't have the money for it. So she ended up being the 2nd woman hired by the U.S. Bureau of Fisheries, was there for 15 years, and she became their editor-in-chief of all of the publications for U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Also, there were a lot of name changes in this time for like federal agencies. So U.S. Bureau of Fisheries, I don't even think it's, I'm looking at you, Jared. I don't even think that's around anymore. Yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of name changing going on, but it's all federal. Now I think it's kind of all mostly encompassed in U.S. Fish and Wildlife, because it used to be 2 separate agencies. So yeah, much later in 1962, she publishes Silent Spring. When she publishes this, I'm going to read you guys this because it's small, but, and this is a quote that I got from her, or some text I got from her website. So when she published it, chemical companies sought to discredit her as a communist or a hysterical woman. Many pulled their ads from a CBS Reports TV special in 1963 entitled The Silent Spring with Rachel Carson. But even though a lot of people pulled their ads and kind of talked bad about it, it got 15 million viewers. which in 1963, that's a lot of viewers. It's still a lot of viewers today, but in 1963, that's a ton. like, so combined with this special that aired and how many people saw it, and JFK's Science Advisory Committee report, which validated her research, this made pesticides a major public issue and kind of put them into the public eye. Okay, here's like the DDT timeline that coincides with the bald eagle population. So in 1930, and this is like a huge success, I'll just point out first, 1930s, like before this was a huge issue, 600 to 800 breeding pairs. 2020, there's 3,000. And this is just in Chesapeake Bay, so this isn't like national, this is just a small study that was done. But they had the best kind of like solid timeline where you can really see these events unfolding. So yeah, in the 1930s, there's 600 to 800 breeding pairs of eagles on the Chesapeake Bay. In the 1940s, that's when DDT becomes really widespread, as used a lot in the US. 1959 is the peak usage in the US, with 80 million pounds applied of DDT that year. And then very shortly after this, Rachel Carson publishes Silent Spring. In between this, obviously, a lot of research happens with the bald eagle population and other birds too. Bald eagles are just a good example because they're super charismatic and people really like them. But it was all bird species, not all, but most bird species were affected by this. Okay, so in '62 she publishes Silent Spring. By the 1970s, there's only 60 breeding pairs found on the Chesapeake Bay. So, you know, to go from 600 to 800 to 60 in 40 years, that's a pretty big impact. By 1972, so just 10 years after she publishes the book, the US bans most applications of DDT. Like I said, it's still used in, to control malaria-causing mosquitoes, not only in the US, but other places. 1978, bald eagles get listed as endangered under the Endangered Species Act, which sounds like scary, but it's actually good because then they have a lot more protections than they would have had. So 2001, they're back up to kind of where they were, so 646 pairs of bald eagles. 2007, the population stabilized enough that they get delisted, which they're still protected under the Migratory Bird Act, and it's like such a long name. I think it's like Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act. I have to write that acronym in like every report I write, so I should know it, but there's a million acronyms in the natural resources world. So yeah, 2007 they're delisted. 2016, 2,000 breeding pairs are found. In 2020, which is the latest I could find in the Chesapeake Bay specifically, there's 3,000 pairs of bald eagles found on the Chesapeake Bay. So even to go from like their historical numbers of 600 to 800, which they'd already been affected by a lot of human things at this point, to 3,000, pretty good. Very good success story of environmental activism and education. And it's one that a lot of people, just out of curiosity, if you guys don't mind, how many people like had heard of this going on, this like DDT bald eagle thing? Okay. So like a lot of people, like I feel like it's one that people have usually heard of, so it's just interesting, it's cool that this book had such
I got a question for you.
Yeah, for sure.
What were the leading indicators that led her to believe it was caused from DDT? You know?
I think she was working for like these federal bureaus. I think it was research they were doing that she was kind of like just privy to. Because she wasn't really, she did her early career, she was a marine biologist, but her later career she was more of like a writer. But I think she was just privy to a lot of the research they were doing, which was kind of like what led her to.
I heard she was really meticulous with her records and everything.
Oh yeah.
Anybody else probably would have been shuffled around, but her, how meticulous she was really made an impact on her.
Yeah, for sure. And another thing, I think I pointed this out to somebody earlier, but so this is her book. And she published under the name Rachel Carson, which at that time was like pretty like brave of her. A lot of like female authors would publish under like their initials or a different name. But even though she published as Rachel Carson, she's, you know, this book was still a huge hit, very popular. So, yeah.
I wanted to add that the bald eagle was only made a national bird a few months ago. A lot of people thought it was a national bird from back
Oh,
when
really?
the country was settled. It's only been official for about 3 months.
Oh, I didn't even know that. That's funny.
Fun fact to know and tell.
Yeah, that is a fun fact. I do have a slide of fun facts, not for this species, but if I did, that would be on it probably. I didn't know that. Okay. Another quote that I like, this is a quote from Michelle Obama, just kind of really like zeroes in on that. We just need to amplify every voice in conservation education. So the ability to read, write, and analyze, the confidence to stand up and demand justice and equality, the qualifications and connections to get your foot in the door and take your seat at the table, all of that starts with education. So just going back to the idea that education is just like the foundation of having confidence to stand up and, you know, write a really cool book that makes a lot of changes. This is I think this picture's from Tennessee. Now I can't remember if this was a monarch or the one that looks exactly like a monarch. Its wing is a little bit cut out by this leaf, but this was from endangered species survey in Tennessee, which we did see a lot of monarchs on that property, because there's a lot of milkweed. Okay, another theme of the book is the power of community. Is how much more powerful we are as a group and like as individuals. We still have individual power, obviously, but coming together for a common cause is always big. So another quote, there's no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about. And I really think this community is a really good example of that. I think there's a lot of really passionate people in this community, because I see it all the time. People who care and people who are like change makers. And so it's kind of cool, which this book, you read this? Jared, did you read this one? Okay. Yeah, The Service Berry. We were like, this is so Veta, and if you haven't read it, you should, because it's about just the power of community and living in like a gift economy. And there's not a lot of that left, like really small communities that are really like interwoven. And I think La Veta is such a beautiful one. So, and the whole time we read that, we're like, that is so La Veta. Like every quote, we're like, oh my gosh. Yeah, so I think La Veta is a really good like kind of microcosm example of community empowerment. Okay, so Hood River and environmental activism. So when Alice first makes this discovery of this pesticide supergrow killing her bees, I think you get the feeling that she feels kind of like overwhelmed by this discovery, and she's like, oh, like do other people know this? Or like am I gonna get like ostracized? And she has the whole like, she's kind of a government employee, so she's kind of like, no, I don't want to like alienate myself from my job, which we all know how that worked out. But so when she begins to share her observations and her bees dying, she finds that she's not the only person concerned about this, and actually like everyone is concerned about this. They just don't really know like the root of the problem. So without the support of all those people, she might not have ever mentioned her concerns and like brought her dead bees into the county extension office to get them tested. So it's just a good example of when their community comes together for the protest they do, it makes changes and it makes like waves and ripples that people are noticing. So just a good example of like a community being strong together. Okay, some success stories. You'll notice a common theme here, that it's all just like wildlife conservation success stories. So one I don't know if a lot of people know about, but like super iconic animal here, pronghorn. Probably like my favorite North American mammal. There's just so many things that are interesting about them. And they're so common now, I think we kind of like take for granted how like they weren't always common. They've gone through a lot of fluctuations. Also I put on here, this is funny, I didn't know this till I lived here, but people call them speed goats. You guys probably know that, but like it makes sense. Like they do look like a goat, which next slide we'll get into all that. But so they're super old species. They've been around since like Ice Age, like Pleistocene era. So historically they think there might have been 35 million in North America, which is like crazy to think about. Now they think there's about 1 million, or like estimated, I think it's between like 800,000 and 1 million. Most of them live in Wyoming. A lot of them live here too, as we know. So yeah, by the late 19th century, I think it was 1915, population had just decreased by 99%, with about 13,000 individuals. This was due to a lot of factors. one, just them trying to figure out living in like a time where humans live too. So overhunting, loss of habitat, the building of fences, and then eventually highways are a big issue for them, which we'll get into that too. All right, here's my fun fact slide. I had to pare it down because there's a lot of fun facts about them. So pronghorn, a lot of people call them antelope. They're not. They look like antelope. They're actually, so most of their, the members of their family did exist in the Pleistocene era, and there were a bunch of them, but they're all extinct today, other than the pronghorn. So they're the last living member of their family, which is Antelope capridae, which is even more confusing because it just sounds like antelope, so it's like, come on. But antelope are actually part of the Bovidae family, so that's like cows and other like animals with like split hooves like that. So deer, antelope are all part of that family. And pronghorn look like them, but they're different. And you can tell, like, even like looking at this picture, like that thing looks like it's from the Ice Age. Like that thing looks historic. And they don't really look like deer. They're, you know, you guys have seen them. They're small, they're funky looking. So this is really interesting. Their closest living relatives are of the Giraffidae family, so giraffes and okapi, which are from Africa, which is just like kind of a crazy fact. And like I said, they did have closer relatives that existed historically. These are just the only ones that are alive today. So they're the last unchanged terrestrial North American mammal from the Pleistocene era, which is the Ice Age. Which also, I thought this timeline was crazy. Started 2.6 million years ago and ended 11,700 years ago. Like, who knew that it was that long? Not me. I was like, that's a long time. That's why I put that in there, because I'm like, that's a crazy fact. And this is another cool fact. So they're super fast. Like, they're the fastest North American land animal. I put 55, you're gonna get into speed. There's like, oh yeah, no I did. But in this video I'm gonna show you, the guy who's like a pronghorn specialist has 60 miles per hour, so, you know, estimate. So yeah, they're the fastest North American land animal. That they think is because they used to have different predators, so now they don't like really have, other than like cars and people, like not a lot of things can like chase down a healthy pronghorn. Nothing really, other than a car. So some of their historic predators were cheetahs, direwolves, short-faced bears, and saber-toothed bats. So that's like why they think they're so fast, because nothing that exists here today could run down like an adult, healthy adult pronghorn. So it's like, why are they that fast? That's why. So another cool thing about them, they have these weird horn antler things. So they have characteristics of both. So antlers typically shed, and they're made of like hair, like keratinous material, and horns are made of bone. And horns don't typically shed. So they have the core of their little horns is bone, and then that black part you see is like a sheath that like falls off. So it's interesting they have like characteristics of both. It's just a unique thing about them. Does anybody else have cool facts about pronghorns that aren't up here? Because I'm like, this is my special interest.
Don't they normally have twins?
I think so. And like that's such a cute little picture.
And moose do too.
Oh really?
One of them related.
Yeah, they're moose I think would be probably part of the Bovidae too. So similar type of animal. But yeah, I thought these little twins, they're little fluffy little butts, so cute. And they do look like, in this picture I'm like that, they do look like they should be on like the African safari, like savannah or something. They look very like exotic to be in North America.
I think the males have black cheek patch, and the females, those don't have to.
Oh really?
And they're,
And the Latin name actually includes capra, which is goat.
Yeah. The speed goat is like a,
That's a
good.
Montana name, right?
Really? Yeah, so I didn't even know that my brother-in-law helped us move here, and he saw them, and he was just calling them speed goats. And like, he didn't even know they were called that. He's like, I just thought they were goats. And then we saw him run, he was like, holy crap, those things are fast. So,
It tastes like goat too.
do they? Oh, that's interesting.
No, they're really good to eat. Yeah.
Really?
Oh,
I
yeah.
was gonna say that their meat can really change depending on what they eat. And a lot of people who hunt antelope in some of the mountain parks, like North Park, South Park, and all that, there's a lot more sage there, and their meat has a strong sage flavor. Whereas you get on the western slope and some more on the eastern slope, their meat tastes much different.
What do you think's better, the sagey stuff?
No, the sage stuff is horrible.
Okay. I was like, they might be like aromatic, I don't know.
Yeah, we'll eat antelope before we go out.
Really?
Yeah. And they're here, eating on the, native grasses, bluegrass,
Yeah.
sand rocks, even those.
Interesting, yeah, because my husband harvested an elk here last year, and we've been eating it, and it's good. But I'm like, I am kind of interested to know what it tastes like. So what changed the pronghorn trajectory? Because they started, like I said, 99% decline by 1915, when kind of like fences were going up the roads. And as like I think a lot of people know, they're not big fence jumpers. They'll go under a fence. They will jump a fence, which I thought this was funny too. I should have put the picture, but on CPW's website, one of the pictures of them is a pronghorn jumping a fence. And I was like, that's funny. They're like, we told you, like in your face. They do jump fences sometimes. But it's rare. They're much more likely to go under, just not even cross a fence. Which in the video I'll show you, they have a really interesting map that shows tracked pronghorns, and like almost always the whole herd will turn around at a highway and they'll just not cross it. So public concern kind of grew for the pronghorn, because like landowners and even hunters were like, oh, there's like not that many of these things around. That's weird, because they were just kind of hunting them like crazy for a long time. So I couldn't find a specific year, but in Colorado anyway, the early 1900s is when they started regulating pronghorn hunting. So today it's estimated that there's about 1 million of them in North America. In this video I'll show you, which is, like I said, a biologist from Wyoming, he says 800,000, so it's a rough estimate. But it's another example of just kind of awareness being brought to a community, and the community coming together and being like, oh, this is concerning. Maybe we should do something about this. So continued pronghorn conservation, other than just the regulating of the hunting, their kind of newest arch nemesis is highways. This is a picture of an overpass in Wyoming. Wyoming is where a lot of this work is happening, but Colorado is also getting with the program. We don't have as many as Wyoming does. Wyoming is where their big migration happens.
There's a couple of these up by Kremlin along the highway.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they just put them in a couple of years ago.
Cool. Yeah, I haven't seen them in person. I've seen some funny videos of wildlife biologists like watching them cross this, and it's just like funny because they're like freaking out, like they're doing it, and they're all so excited and so happy. I love like the things wildlife biologists get excited about, which that is exciting. That's cool. So yeah, it took like a lot of different agencies and just people cooperating to make this happen. Because obviously, like, that's expensive. Like, that's a lot of money. And people don't love knowing their tax. Or I mean, I think this is a cool thing for your tax dollars to go to, but some people might not like that. Let's see.
Does 5G affect animal populations at all? Are you finding any research in that?
What at 5G?
Like mobile satellite waves, any of the...
Electromagnetic.
Thank you, EMFs, electromagnetic.
I think maybe there's some like effects on like bird migration potentially, but not that I don't want to tell you anything that I'm not sure. I haven't. That's not like in really my wheelhouse. So I couldn't really answer that one definitively.
They said they don't like underpasses, that they need an overpass.
Yeah, and I'm going to show you guys a couple of videos just because it's cool. It is cool, and I want someone that knows more about it than I do to explain it to you guys. But yeah, they're very picky about like what they want to use to cross the highway, which is like kind of weird. Because a lot of animals, like, they'll just walk out on the highway, they don't care. But not these guys. So it was like a really diverse team of people that worked together to create this. Wildlife Conservation Society, different non-governmental organizations, universities, and state agencies. So the Wyoming DOT, Department of Transportation. This was a quote from the previous pronghorn project coordinator for the Wildlife Conservation Society, Dr. Beckman. He said this really shows that when a diverse set of constituents come together to solve a common problem, really neat things can happen. So again, it just shows like people coming together as a community to really like care about an issue. I think that's the video, which I'm gonna play this for you guys on YouTube. This one is just about a guy who photographs the migration, and then the next video is about the actual the overpasses. I just thought this one was interesting. And it's from National Geographic.
Where's
26 years old. And
We got, I think you need to minimize the
Oh.
slideshow, sorry.
Where is it filmed?
Wyoming. Yep. Yeah, both of these videos are from Wyoming. They just like have, Colorado is getting with the program, but, and there are wildlife overpasses in Colorado, but most of this work is happening in Wyoming. It's like, I think it's not updating, because the screen is YouTube, but these videos just don't want to play. We kind of were wrestling with these earlier. Let's see. Oh, there it goes. Okay, change
Now the-
whatever you did.
Now are we on it? No?
Okay. Oh, nice.
There we go.
Thank you.
There.
All right, let's start it over. And this guy, just for background knowledge, I don't think he's a wildlife biologist, or he's not a wildlife biologist, he's a wildlife photographer, but his work is just about like bringing attention to this migration and just to pronghorn in general, because like I said, like they're so common, I feel like we're just like, yeah, they're around, but very unique species.
Bill Reese, I'm 26 years old, and I'm a wildlife photographer. The Pronghorn Passage Project is one of the longest land-mounted migrations in the Western Hemisphere. It's truly fascinating. There's a group of about 300 pronghorn that migrate through the mountains of Western Wyoming twice a year. My goal was to document this pronghorn migration. The first thing I had to do was walk with the migration and figure out where they were going. Then I started to set up camera traps, which are cameras that I would set up in front of the migration, and then the animals would walk through and take their own picture. The most exciting part was probably just to document them crossing the rivers in the springtime. The fences and the highways were definitely the worst things for the migrating pronghorn. I photographed this migration to inspire people to care about it. It was very important to me just because it's something that's happening right in the middle of the United States, and it's something very ancient. It's something that we all should be proud of. I'm definitely not a human-centric person. When I put wildlife first, I enjoy just sitting in a place where there's absolutely no noise and you just hear birds and animals walking around and the trees swaying in the wind and things like that. As there's more and more people on this planet and more people that are demanding more resources, we have to show each other the human conflict with wildlife.
Yeah, I thought that was cool to just show these. Gotta love you too. Yeah, it was just cool, like him, it's just seeing someone who's so passionate. Like he literally followed these pronghorn for their whole migration. Like that's passion. I know, like that guy just walked after a bunch of longhorn or pronghorn. Here's the video about the overpasses. It's 3 minutes long, so I don't want to like video you guys to death, but it's just they can explain it better than I can. I wish that I was a pronghorn biologist, maybe someday. And this one's in Wyoming.
What runs 65 miles per hour in southern Wyoming? Pronghorn, America's fastest man animal. Beyond their speed, they are also known for long-distance migrations across vast landscapes. There used to be more than 20 million pronghorn across the prairies. Now they are down to 800,000, and half of those live in Wyoming. But pronghorn aren't the only thing that feeds across southern Wyoming. Interstate 80 is one of America's most important roads, but unfortunately, it fragments habitat for dozens of pronghorn herds.
Wildlife collisions are a concern for the interstate, but the bigger problem is that pronghorn are cut off from places of refuge, especially in winter. In bad years, they sometimes get hit because they are trying to cross to areas with less snow. Over time, the biggest problem is getting cut off from habitat.
Ultimately, this lack of connectivity
I'm gonna
can
pause
limit
this so
the
you guys
size
can see
and
this
health
map.
of
I think it's
wildlife
really interesting.
populations.
Yeah, so this is, they put GPS collars on not all the pronghorn, just a few from different herds. And so they use the same color because I think there is some crossing with these orange herds, but like they literally, like, they get to the highway and just stop. Same over here. And even with the orange ones that you see them crossing, they are literally crossing right there, like where that dot is. And you can see a huge bottleneck happening here. Like it takes them a long time of like bouncing around, trying to find a place to cross. And just, these are, you know, it's a lot of energy waste, doing all this back and forth thing, trying to cross. And even when they do cross, you can see that like, there's dense here, and this is not so dense. So it's just a very cool, super cool project, but yeah.
And what's the purple that they didn't cross at all then? They just,
I think the colors just represent different herds.
oh, do they? Okay.
Yeah, the colors,
All right.
I don't think they mean anything about the crossing, it's
Okay.
just like a few different herds, or different animals that they tracked have different colors.
I'm Ben Robb. I research ways to reconnect pronghorn habitat along Interstate 80 in Wyoming. One solution is wildlife crossing structures. Near Pinedale, Wyoming, biologists have found that pronghorn and overpasses improve connectivity. Nevada and Utah recently built wildlife bridges across I-80. These wildlife bridges constantly need to build, so they need to be put in places where wildlife will use them.
One part of my research uses pronghorn GPS data to pinpoint the best sites for future overpasses on Interstate 80 in Wyoming. In the meantime, there are dozens of existing underpasses and bridges, but very few are designed with wildlife in mind. In my project, I used camera traps to identify if pronghorn are still able to use these structures to cross under the interstate. We're out here looking at different underpasses, and this one is for a mining road. This is a perfect location to put up a trail camera, so we can monitor if pronghorn are actually coming through here. There are a lot of signs of animals, but the camera tells us exactly how many and when they move through.
While mule deer sometimes cross the highway in surprising places, pronghorn deer more over lines of sight. For example, we've documented one pronghorn crossing near cable line, but the vast majority of animals don't even try to cross it. That's because crossings don't have wildlife friendly fencing, and they aren't near existing living borders.
All this makes Interstate 80 a serious roadblock for pronghorn populations. This research will help to identify and potentially improve existing crossings for pronghorn. If they are finding ways through underpasses, maybe we can enhance them for better connectivity. We hope this work could be a roadmap for reconnecting the Indian habitat, so people and wildlife can be safe and get to where they need to go.
So that's just kind of a better explanation of the migration. Both those videos were enlightening. Okay.
Butterfly.
Just gonna X out of that. All right. Okay, so this is where Colorado is kind of at right now with wildlife crossings. So I didn't put this on here. In 2019, there was an executive order passed like by the state governor, basically like making way for this bill to happen. So a bill was introduced to the Colorado General Assembly in 2022. It's now passed and become law. And it's called Safe Crossings for Colorado Wildlife and Motorists. I'll read the summary first. So it's basically creating a fund that the DOT can use to fund projects that provide these safe road crossings. And I don't know if I've seen any in Colorado. I see like the big elk fences on the highways, like up near Denver and stuff. But they're working on it, I guess. So another thing I thought was cool, I looked at this bill's like homepage. So it had 4 prime sponsors, 2 Colorado senators and 2 Colorado representatives, but they were from both political parties. So I thought that was neat because a lot of bills often are not supported by both parties. So I thought that was a pretty cool testament to like a community mindset over like individualistic mindset. So I thought that was an interesting fact about this bill. Okay. Another theme of the book that we saw a lot was grief. And everybody in the book was dealing with a lot of different kinds of grief and for different reasons. But a lot of the main theme of the book was just grief and how we deal with it. So when we first meet Alice, she refers to herself as Alice Island. So she's very isolated and she's not really letting people in to like help her. And she's using other coping mechanisms that are like working, but like obviously like not really. So she's feeling very alone and just trying to cope with it by herself. So then she stumbles upon, or she like hits Jacob with a truck, and he's like, "That's fine, let's be friends." So, and like it's just a very like someone she never would have thought she would like be friends with or like live with, just like a teenage boy. So they discover each other and end up finding new ways to deal with their grief. So whenever she actually lets people in, acknowledges this, she kind of rediscovers her hopes and dreams. She quits her job where they've been like treating her badly, and she starts this cool new business with Jacob. She kind of uses community and making friends to get through her grief. So environmental activism and grief. And this was something I kind of just like discovered. I didn't just discover it. I mean, I know it's real, but I just like researched it. So grief over the climate. I think a lot of people have it and maybe don't even like name it as like grief over the climate, but I think that is what it is. So from the American Psychological Association, they define it as conceptualizing the losses and anticipated losses associated with climate change. Let's see. Oh yeah. So people experience climate grief when they notice or anticipate the loss of species, ecosystems, and meaningful landscapes due to acute or chronic environmental change. And having this kind of reaction of like sadness and kind of feeling like lonely and kind of hopeless is super common. It's just like kind of a human reaction to the loss of anything. And so climate change, a lot of people see and feel like it's like just a loss of stability and like the loss of a predictable future that, we're going to have all these resources forever and they're always going to be here. And when you kind of like start to think, oh, maybe we won't, and they'll go, you do feel like a sense of like loneliness or loss. And it can make you feel lonely. I thought this is also from this American Psychological Association. So feelings of grief over climate and a changing world are often invalidated or seen as controversial. So sometimes it's like a difficult thing to talk to like your friends about, or like your family or whoever, because they might get mad at you or whatever. So it makes you feel lonely. It makes you feel like you're the only one maybe thinking about it, but you're not. Many people feel this way, and there's a lot of people doing something about it. That's like environmental activism. So 3 like things that this guy Andrew Bryant, who's like one of the researchers of this, suggests: talking, uniting, and acting. So talking, just basically like talking to your peers about how you feel about this. I thought this was interesting too, because I think this is like how I feel a lot about it, and a lot of people do. Discovering areas where you might have guilt, shame, or self-judgment about your own environmental footprint and your capacity to do environmental activism, or like your consumption choices. And I think I feel guilt over it, because I mean, nobody's perfect and nobody always does the right, most sustainable thing, and sometimes you can't, or it's hard, or it's expensive, and I think a lot of people feel that way. So uniting with like-minded people, like other people who are like, oh yeah, like I feel like that, is always very helpful, like getting together as a group. And then after you do that, you can act. And I do think Veta too has a lot of opportunity to do this. There's a lot of volunteer opportunity, and there's different societies. Veta Trails, they've always got volunteer opportunities. So like I feel like in this community there are meaningful ways to kind of become empowered and feel like you're making a difference. Another quote, which I thought was interesting, so a vibrant, fair, and regenerative future is possible, not when thousands of people do climate justice activism perfectly, but when millions of people do the best they can. I thought that was really powerful, because you don't have to be perfect, just like when you can make a good choice, do it, and you know, when it's maybe hard or you feel like you can't do it, then maybe you can't do it that time, but you know, do the best you can, and that's all anybody can do. So this slide is kind of like an open, or not kind of, it is open-ended. These are just like some like small things that I think are kind of easy daily things to do, but open obviously to everyone else's ideas. So obviously like the theme of this whole thing is educating yourself and educating others. Supporting your local environmental efforts and finding your people who also support it. Recent examples, this is from sand dunes. This was a protest that happened like a month ago at all national parks in the country. So this is sand dunes, this is Rocky Mountain, which the Slavey sign was funny. It says, cuts to National Park Service mean bears won't be the only ones crapping in the woods. Which I thought was funny. It's like no park rangers, no rules. People act up. Being aware of like who is in your local and federal government and voting in like all the elections you can, obviously important. The leave no trace principles, this is like a QR to just like the National Park website on that. And just being respectful when you're in these areas, any natural area. And small changes, like using some kind of reusable water vessel. And, which Ashley's got us on this one, using reusable coffee cups, like small things, but kind of make a big impact. And if anybody else has like, this obviously is a very short list of things you can do, but does anybody else have anything that, no pressure, but yeah.
Just a little bit of a specification on local and federal government. We are in a unique spot in Colorado. For Huerfano and Los Angeles counties, we have a representative and a senator that sit on the natural resources and agriculture committees for the Colorado State Legislature. So they have a little bit extra power when it comes to natural resource concerns. And as you mentioned, natural resources tend to be pretty bipartisan issue. So regardless of their party, I think that there's still strong resources. I've been actively looking out for events for them. I've not yet seen one, but it's also not election year. So, Senator Ron Pelton and Representative Ty Winter are the two that sit on the committees and serve this area of Colorado. So, on the note of knowing your local government, those are two really good ones to know.
That is interesting about Colorado. I do think it's cool because when you get to things about like wildlife conservation, normally, historically, it's a bipartisan issue usually. Like a lot of people care about this, people from both sides of the political spectrum. So,
agriculture is a major pollution, so supporting organic agriculture would be another way.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. And supporting, and another like cool thing about here is like we have a lot of local opportunities to buy locally, which is kind of unique. A lot of like cities I've lived in, like you go to farmers markets and stuff like that. But a lot of those people, like their produce isn't even like their own. They're just like reselling it for someone else. So, but here when you go to that farmers market, it's like that is those people's vegetables they grew and brought. And there's local roots in Walsenburg. They've got tons of local stuff, and I mean a lot of the stores here. So this is a community with a lot of opportunity to support organic farming and local farming.
I think if you can do it on a small scale, as your own backyard.
Yes, absolutely.
You can make sure you're not using pesticides, herbicides, you can compost, and so on, and that way you're recycling everything back into the land.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I've gone to a gardening seminar here, and there's another gardening seminar coming up at the Spanish Peaks Library, the one in Walsenburg in April, so keep an eye out for that. Another big thing, which I don't know if you guys are on social media, and you might not like social media or whatever, but Facebook here is like the event center. So if you have Facebook, yeah, I think so too. Like, I don't really use Facebook as like a social media, it's like an event calendar.
Yeah. Is it true that 40% of the land in Colorado is nationally owned? It's owned by the federal system. It's
You might, I
40%.
guess say Jared might be, he's actually, this is a Colorado man right here.
I'll have to look that up.
Is that an accurate number?
I'll have to look that up, I'm not positive on
Okay.
that, but
Yeah.
Because
there's,
that's major for the future then.
yeah, there is a lot of public land in Colorado. Where we live here in Huerfano, there's not as much. Yeah, there's still a lot of public land, but I mean, compared to the northern Front Range, it's, yeah, everywhere. But I'll see if I can find some actual numbers.
Thank you.
You've got to like discover it here too. An app, which I should have put a QR for this, if you guys are smartphone users. There's an app called Cotrex. Cotrex, yeah, and it's so good, and it shows you all the like public trails around here. And it's CO, like Colorado, Co, and then TRAX.
Yes.
EX. Yeah, so Cotrex. Super good app, it's free. I think you can even use it with no service. You can download trails on it anyway. And it's great. I just discovered a new mountain biking trail at Lathrop that I had no idea was even there. It's amazing. So yeah, and that app is awesome for discovering kind of public lands around you. And yeah, like you said, the local gardening, such a good idea. Kind of a learning curve here for me anyway. I'm not there yet, but I'm trying. And yeah, I feel like another just reminder of, no one is like perfect at environmental activism or being the best environmental steward. That's just like the reality, but you just do what you can. And enough people doing the best they can, eventually, hopefully, make a difference. Anybody else have any other
I would just say that this community is amazing for getting together. I mean, when they were trying to drill all around here, we got CHC together, Citizens for Huerfano County, when we ran shale oil out here.
Nice. That's amazing.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
I've only been here about like 2.5. This will be like the start of our 3rd year, which is crazy. So I'm newish, but yeah, I've never seen like a community that like engages like this community. It's crazy. Well, I was just thinking, I was like, since I've lived here, I've done a lot of like talking to people. Like I've gotten to talk at the high school too, and I'm like, living in a big city, you just don't really get that opportunity as much. So it's really cool. Like it's a really unique community.
May I ask, where did you come from?
I'm from Missouri. We moved here from Buffalo, New York. So we're just looking for the sun.
It's interesting to me though, that although this is a beautiful area, you see so much trash thrown out of cars. I mean, mainly beer cans and bottles.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
On county roads. I mean, why do people think that's even okay?
I think it's another like example of like that education is really empowering. And I mean, not that like people haven't been told like, hey, you shouldn't throw trash out the window. Like most people, I think, know that.
Yeah, but they haven't been told the consequences.
So
I mean, if you throw out glass bottles, you could potentially start a fire.
Yeah, really, anything. I mean, around here, like,
yeah,
even like the reflection of an aluminum can here might start a little fire. You never know.
Every exit's like a garbage dump. All the fast food that you bought in Walsenburg or wherever.
Yeah.
As a culture, we've incorrectly allowed and bought into the narrative that environmental protection, it costs money. It's economically unsound, where in fact the opposite is true.
Yeah, for sure.
Environmental degradation is essentially a subsidy for corporations that cause it, but it never comes up on an accounting sheet. It's externalized. So it's really a dishonest form of capitalism which we're thriving on.
Absolutely. Yeah, and another thing that I think, or that I hold as an opinion about environmental activism is obviously our actions are cumulative. Everyone's actions are. But there's also, things going on that are a lot bigger than us. Like how you're bringing up of just kind of we have a destructive system. So it's hard. Which this book talks about that. There's a really cool quote about basically being like chained to a really harmful economy and like feeling like I don't want to live like this, but like this is life and I'm like bound to this economy because I have to live and I have to eat and I have to have a house or somewhere to live, So this book, I think, The Serviceberry, it talks about that, about kind of feeling like you're like shackled to this lifestyle of kind of destructive capitalism.
Another activity that took place locally was when the train was going to take poisonous materials over to the other side. And we knew that there had been at least 8 accidents with this train. And I saw a sign when I was swimming over at the Blanca pool. They were announcing that they were going to do this. And I told the people at the pool, you don't want this, because here's what's happened. And that started then, and then people here got involved, and they found out that it was extremely dangerous to do that, and they scotched it.
It was liquid cyanide.
Yeah.
Coming right through town.
Yeah, that's a bad one. Yeah, and I feel like this book, The Music of Bees, like that's kind of what's happening in their community. Where like, and Supergirl was like giving the farmers like money and free samples, and like, this is awesome, don't worry about it. Like, and in fact, it was not awesome, so.
DDT's good for you.
Yeah, exactly, and like the DDT is for good for me poster. Yeah, I'll kind of end it with a quote that's from the Service Dairy. A lot of quotes, but a lot of good quotes about environmental activism. This quote kind of like, I read it enough times today that I won't like cry when I read it, because it's emotional. So to name the world as a gift is to feel your membership in the web of reciprocity. It makes you happy and it makes you accountable. So kind of like acknowledging that like the world isn't just ours to like take, and it's a gift to us from the earth. It does make you accountable. It makes you need to care. You need to think about these things, and you need to tell other people to care and think about them. So yeah, that's kind of that's the end of my presentation, but if anybody has other things to add or questions, like feel free. I don't know if I can answer all the questions, but I can try.
Let's throw out that 40% number was accurate.
It was?
Yeah, so 60% of Colorado is publicly owned. Yeah.
60% is publicly owned.
Yep.
That's amazing. Yeah.
This is totally irrelevant, well not irrelevant to your talk, but you might be interested to know that after Max von Frisch finished his studies on bees and got his Nobel Prize, he spent his rest of his life working on autism.
Really?
Wow.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating, no?
Yeah, it is. It's crazy, like just the paths people's lives take. We see that in this book too, of like having a career that you spend your whole life on, like, oh, this is like my thing, and then you find your actual thing that you're passionate about, and you're like, oh, now this is my actual thing. But yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I really appreciate everybody coming and
Thank you.
being really engaging, and thank you guys so much. And it was really nice to meet everybody.
Thank you.